So I just found out that other countries actually hold their leaders accountable when they commit crimes. And I know it sounds far-fetched, but it's apparently pretty common. For example, the former South Korean president, Yoon Suk-yeol, was just sentenced to life in prison for being the ringleader of an insurrection back in 2024. Now, you can argue he actually got off easy, seeing as how prosecutors were seeking the death penalty for him, which was the fate of their country's former military dictator 30 years ago when he was hit with the same charge. And this is such a bizarre and foreign concept to me that I had to see if other countries did the same thing, and sure enough, that is indeed the case. Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, often referred to as the Trump of the tropics, started serving his 27-year prison sentence in December for doing almost exactly what Donald Trump did on January 6th. Politico reports the former president and several of his allies were convicted by a panel of Supreme Court justices for attempting to overthrow Brazil's democracy following his 2022 election defeat. The plot included plans to kill President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Vice President Geraldo Alckmin, and Justice de Moraes. The plan also involved encouraging an insurrection early 2023. The former president was also found guilty of charges including leading an armed criminal organization and attempting the violent abolition of the democratic rule of law. This is honestly mind-blowing to me because as an American, I was under the impression that you're supposed to allow presidents to run again after they tried to overthrow the government, and then you grant them near absolute immunity for future crimes that they inevitably commit. But apparently, other countries do things a little bit differently. And what's crazy is that Bolsonaro modeled his coup after Donald Trump's coup, with his supporters storming the Brazilian Congress and all, yet only one of these leaders faced accountability for their crimes. Now, to be fair, Bolsonaro did take things a lot further with a plot to kill Lula, although Trump supporters did construct gallows at the Capitol and threatened to hang Mike Pence, which Trump reportedly expressed support for behind closed doors. Americans saw that and decided to punish Trump by making him president again. And surprise, surprise, he's already laying the groundwork to steal the next election. But if all of this wasn't shocking enough, get this. Other countries also hold elites accountable for being in the Epstein files. As AP reports, British police arrested Prince Andrew on suspicion of misconduct in public office over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And I kid you not, he was arrested on his birthday. We would never arrest an elite like this in the first place, but we would certainly let them veto that arrest if it was on their birthday. If they said, this is my birthday wish, we'd be like, well, we have no choice. We have to let you go. So this is truly wild to me. But the UK doesn't seem to be the only country who's taking swift action here, because former French politician Jacques Lang resigned from his position at the Paris Arab World Institute after being named in the Epstein files hundreds of times. And French police are conducting searches as part of an investigation to determine whether or not there's evidence that he committed laundering of the proceeds of tax evasion through an offshore company that he jointly set up with Jeffrey Epstein. Additionally, the Council of Europe just stripped Norway's former prime minister of diplomatic immunity, and his own country just charged him with aggravated corruption following a probe into his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And the maximum penalty for that charge is 10 years in prison. But aside from the UK, France, and Norway, other countries like Sweden, Slovakia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Ireland are all investigating the ties that their elites have to Jeffrey Epstein, as Representative Melanie Stansbury points out. And this is also crazy to me because we just don't do that in the United States. In fact, nearly a dozen elites just in Trump's regime alone have ties to Jeffrey Epstein, including Steve Bannon, Elon Musk, Mehmet Oz, RFK Jr., Howard Lutnick, and Trump himself, but none of them are even facing a minimal amount of pressure to resign. But the question is whether or not any of these elites, including ones who aren't part of the regime, are going to face prosecution for crimes that they may have committed. And when Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche was asked this very question, this was his answer.
I'll never say no, and we will always investigate any evidence of misconduct. But as you know, it is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. It isn't a crime to have lunch.
Didn't look like that's all that was going on some of those photos. I mean, if the photos could speak, some of them look pretty bad.
That's right. And unfortunately, photos can't speak. And so we need witnesses.
All right, so you're telling me there's a chance. Nice. Now, he's correct. Photos can't speak. And of course, we do need witnesses. That is indeed true, which is why, hear me out, you conduct what's known as an investigation, like these other countries are doing, in order to gather evidence. But apparently, we just don't do that here in America. In fact, we bury evidence that implicates elites at the highest level. As journalist Roger Sollenberger reports, the Justice Department reportedly deleted 4 interviews with the victim who accused Donald Trump of raping and assaulting her when she was a child. They also deleted her case files from the DOJ website, even though she's an incredibly important witness, seeing as how she sued Epstein's estate for sexual abuse back in 2021 and was even awarded a settlement because of it. So this information is obviously in the public's interest. And Blanche is right. We do need witnesses, which is why it's just so unfortunate that the DOJ may have made a little oopsie and deleted testimony from a key witness who accused Donald Trump of pedophilia. But I guess they must have accidentally hit delete. Shucks. Too bad. Now, given what we've learned today about other countries, I'd have to imagine that they'd do things different. If they were in charge, I would imagine that they would arrest the DOJ officials for covering up a criminal conspiracy involving elite pedophiles. And if I had to guess, I don't think that their populations would tolerate 10 different Epstein co-conspirators running the country while we're finding out all of this information, and that there would be immense pressure for them to resign. But as you know, we're not like those other countries. Crime is essentially decriminalized here for elites. So they're allowed to get away with whatever they want. It doesn't matter the crime. Treason, insurrection, corruption, constitutional violations, crimes against humanity, pedophilia, you name it. It's their country, and we're all just lucky enough to be living in it. Because we're the greatest country in the world, so it's cool. And don't get me wrong, every country has its share of problems, but we're so far outside the bounds of normality that we don't even belong on the same planet as these other countries. It's not just that we let criminal elites commit crimes with impunity, it's that we don't even do the bare minimum for our own people. I mean, we're the only industrialized country on the planet that doesn't offer free healthcare to people at the point of service. In fact, our center-left party doesn't even support that, even though universal healthcare isn't controversial to conservative parties in other countries. I mean, sure, they're trying to water it down and privatize it and Americanize it, but they at least have to pretend like they support their universal healthcare systems. Otherwise, there'd be intense backlash. But it's not just that. Other countries also offer free college and paid time off and sick leave, and they have high-speed rail and infrastructure that's not completely dilapidated, and they have relatively normal people running their country, whereas we have a fascist death cult in charge of government who won't even let us have a little bit more subsidies for our shitty privatized healthcare. It's just so goddamn unfair. It's why polls show that nearly 2/3 of young people want to leave the country because things really are that bad and there's just no hope that it'll ever get better. But I do want to share some reactions from fellow Americans to the news stories that we talked about today because, like me, they were downright jealous that other countries were at least functional enough to hold their biggest criminals accountable. So here's what some Americans said in response to the life sentence for South Korea's former president over his coup attempt. C.C. Merrick Garland. True. Imagine being a place where a head of state is imprisoned for trying to overthrow the country. I literally can't imagine that. Normal people in the U.S. watching other countries hold their corrupt leaders accountable, and there's a picture of Squidward looking enviously at SpongeBob and Patrick. There's a picture of the 700 Club guy praying, saying, Jesus, I see what you've done for other people, and I want that for me. Must be nice. We should have done this. There's a Simpsons meme. See, America, that's how you punish your leader when they break the law. Weird seeing people held accountable for trying to seize power undemocratically. In the United States, we just hand it back to you and let you try again. How a normal country treats an insurrectionist president. This person just shared a picture of DW staring longingly through a fence. Yeah, I guess it does make sense to arrest a political figurehead for that, huh? Now, as for reactions to the Prince Andrew news, not a single arrest in America. This person shared the 700 Club meme again. Jesus, I see what you've done for other people, and I want that for me. Prince Andrew has been arrested. The British monarchy is actually holding its rich pedophiles accountable. Meanwhile, back in the United States, our pedophiles are allowed to run Fortune 500 companies, and even worse, are allowed to remain president and start wars with Iran. Americans waking up to news that Prince Andrew has been arrested for Epstein ties, and it's the SpongeBob meme again. Americans seeing European royals and leaders get taken down for Epstein, while our pedophile president is being protected by the entire government, and there's a picture of a disappointed John Cena. Yeah, Yet, not a single Republican showed up for Les Wexner's hearing yesterday regarding his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. Howard Lutnick is still Commerce Secretary, and Trump's mentioned thousands of times in the Epstein files. Wake up, America. Are you for child abuse or are you not? Okay, can we get an American version of this now? Every other country holds their officials accountable for the Epstein files except for the United States. We harbor pedophiles because we can't admit we were wrong in voting them into power. We've become the absolute butt of the world, and it's depressing that there's no change in sight. It really is, but I've got one more reaction to you, and this one is a little bit ironic, so I saved it for last. The GOP shared a picture of Bill Clinton, I guess, looking nervous, reacting to news that Prince Andrew was arrested, and I've got to say, that one's pretty interesting because you're in power right now. So theoretically, you could arrest him. So the ball's in your court. He should be investigated at a minimum. But I mean, you're just not doing anything and you're saying, oh, he must be nervous. But I mean, you're not really proving anything or owning him because you're kind of covering up for him, as well as Donald Trump, which brings me to point number 2. Donald Trump is also in the Epstein files more than Bill Clinton. Now, they both should be investigated and prosecuted potentially, but like, are we just going to pretend like that's not the case? You're going to tweet this out ironically and not even acknowledge the elephant in the room? I mean, this is why things are so bad, because these are the kinds of people who run the country. They have no fucking shame. And it's just sad because I want what every other country has. Hell, I'll take half. I'll take a quarter. I'll take a crumb, a modicum of what every other country has. But unfortunately, it feels impossible, seeing as how our country really was fucked from the beginning. The founders, who we've deified for some reason, stole this land and committed a genocide, and we still haven't acknowledged that genocide. And then they racistly designed our entire system around the institution of slavery, and they gave reactionaries a baked-in advantage with the Electoral College in the Senate, where states like Wyoming, with a population of 5 people and 2 dogs, get as many senators as millions of people in California. It's so unfair. And to be clear, no, the system isn't balanced out by the House of Representatives like they thought it would be, because reactionaries just gerrymander representation away from non-reactionaries. So things are bad because we're a country built and run by complete dumb fucks. It was deliberately designed to be perpetually run by the dumbest, most reactionary people in the country. So it's no surprise that we're this dysfunctional. The only thing that's surprising to me is that we've lasted this long without completely collapsing, although we'll find out soon if we're still able to keep it together. So I just want to close with a question specifically to all of my international viewers. What's it like? Can you tell us, we live in America, what it's like to live in a comparatively normal country? That would be much appreciated. I'd like to envision what that would be like. So if you could just share some details about your country, I'd like to hear them.